The wedding was Maya's project and Maya's masterwork, and by the time it arrived, Maya's complete vindication of every opinion she had ever held about everything. She had coordinated with Tariq across 8 time zones for 4 months, with the focused efficiency of 2 people who had discovered, somewhere between the West Village dinner and the October proceeding, that they had identical standards for how things should be done, and a complementary intolerance for how things were usually done instead. The result was, by any reasonable measure, extraordinary. But Lara had known it would be. She had simply stayed out of the way and photographed the planning stages, and let the 2 of them have it, because some gifts were best received without interference. The date was the 2nd Saturday of April. The location was the Al Karam Plateau. The time was 5 in the afternoon, which put the ceremony at golden hour. Not the frantic golden hour of summer, when the light arrived and left with the urgency of something that knew its own rarity, but the long, generous golden hour of spring, when the sun took its time and the plateau sandstone held the warmth and the shadows fell with a precision that 1,700 years of watching had apparently perfected. Dr. Nasser had provided a geological survey of the exact spot where the light was best. Lara had not asked him to do this. He had done it because he was Dr. Nasser, and the occasion warranted the application of every available instrument of understanding. The morning of the wedding, she woke at 5:30 again. The body's habit, the photographer's instinct, the orientation toward light that had become her most reliable internal compass. She lay in the room that had been hers for 7 months now, in a palace that had stopped being someone else's palace and started being the place where her cameras lived and her work was made and her marriage was about to begin. And she looked at the ceiling and thought, today. Just that. Today. Simple, complete, entirely sufficient. Maya arrived at 7 with coffee and the contained energy of a woman who has been waiting for this specific morning since a departures hall at JFK and considers it the reasonable culmination of everything. She came in, set down the coffee, looked at Lara sitting on the bed in the morning light, and her face did the thing it did when she had more to feel than she had words for. The fullness of it, the warmth of a person who loves you without condition, and is, in this moment, unreservedly happy for you. "How do you feel?" Maya asked. Lara thought about it honestly, the way she thought about everything that deserved honesty. "Like the light is right," she said. Maya looked at her for a moment. Then she nodded, slowly, the nod of someone who has received an answer and recognizes it as complete. "Good," she said. "Drink your coffee. I have a schedule." "Of course you do." "It is laminated," Maya said with dignity, and produced it. The schedule was indeed laminated. It was also color-coded, annotated in 3 different inks, and contained a contingency column for weather, late arrivals, and what Maya had listed with perfect seriousness as Tariq-related delays. Tariq, when presented with this document at breakfast, studied it with the focused attention he gave things that interested him and said, "The contingency column is generous." "It's based on data," Maya said. "Specifically the data of having coordinated with you for 4 months. Tariq considered this. "Fair," he said, and ate his bread. Karim arrived at the table to find his brother and the woman who had become, across 4 months of transatlantic planning calls, something between his co-conspirator and his favorite opponent, examining a laminated schedule together with the solemn concentration of people reviewing a battle plan. He looked at Lara. She looked back at him over the rim of her coffee cup and the morning light and the 7 months of mornings before this one, and thought, there it is. That is the whole face. That is the one I have been watching come out of hiding since the torchlight, and it is entirely, completely his. and entirely, completely mine. And today we are going to stand on a plateau at golden hour and make that permanent. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning," she said. Tariq looked up from the schedule. "You're both being very calm," he said, with mild suspicion. "One of us has done this before," Lara said. Karim looked at her. The real smile. Complete. Immediate. No distance left between the almost and the actual. More deliberately this time, he said. The plateau received them the way it always did, with the patient grandeur of a place that has been waiting for 400 years and can wait considerably longer if necessary, and is therefore in no hurry about anything, but is entirely prepared for whatever arrives. The path up the slope in the April afternoon, the ruins spreading at the summit, the watchtowers at their cardinal points, the desert below turning its spring colors, amber and rose and the deep red of the sandstone at the angle of the late light. The guests were small in number and large in meaning. The sheikh, who had come down the steps of the palace with a formality that broke, briefly and completely, when he took Lara's hands before she got into the car and said nothing at all, but held her gaze with the amber eyes that were his son's eyes, and which said, without words, everything that needed to be said about welcome and belonging and the specific gratitude of a father watching his son choose well. Daniel had flown in from New York, on the grounds that he had published the article and therefore had a professional stake in the outcome. Dr. Nasser, who was technically the officiant, he had obtained the relevant certification with the thoroughness he brought to everything, stood at the designated spot with his geological survey folded in his breast pocket and his camera, for once, pointed at the ceremony rather than at the formations. Nadia stood at the back with the composed dignity of a woman who has served this family for 20 years and considers this morning her own quiet victory. And Tariq, in a suit that Maya had not selected but had approved, stood beside his brother at the plateau's edge with the expression she had come to know as his truest face. Not the lightness, not the performance, but the version underneath, which was simply love, direct and uncomplicated. Maya walked Lara up the path, not because there was no one else to do it, but because there was no one more right. They walked together in the spring afternoon light, Maya in deep green, Lara in the color that had no precise name, somewhere between amber and copper, and the thing between them that she had stopped trying to name and simply worn instead. And the plateau opened up ahead of them with its usual sudden generosity, and the desert was immense below, and the sky was immense above, and the 1,700-year-old watchtower was exactly where it had always been, patient and permanent and not done yet. Karim turned when he heard them on the path. He turned and he looked at her coming toward him across the plateau in the golden hour light, with the desert below and the sky above and the whole history of this place around them. And his expression did the thing it always did. The shift. The slow tectonic movement of something arriving. The face he wore when he had apparently decided that composure was more effort than the moment deserved. And then it did something it had not done before. It went entirely open. Not unguarded in the way of a man off his watch. Open in the way of a man who has decided, completely and deliberately, to be fully present in the best moment of his life, without any part of himself held back. She crossed the plateau toward him, with Maya at her shoulder, and the golden hour doing what the golden hour did, turning everything it touched to something between beautiful and unbearable. And she looked at him, looking at her, and thought, 43 photographs. The wrong turn. The warmth of a gun barrel. The The blindfold and the dark truck and the counting. The torchlight and the keffiyeh coming down and "Are you injured?" The checkpoint at night and the worn document and the older man with the lamp. The palace gates and the fountain and the woman in burgundy on the steps. The breakfast courtyard and the corridor light and the note about lamb. The roof terrace and the camera screen and the fingers on the strap. The 7 days and the study and the dissolution papers. The plateau at sunrise and the watchtower still waiting. The kitchen at midnight and the hands on the table and the full truth and the real smile finally complete. The courtyard fountain and "I'm in love with you" and the 400 years. The New York apartment and the photograph on the wall and the box of worn dark wood with the ring the color of this hour. And now this, and now here, and now him, entirely present on the plateau where it had always been going to happen, in the light that was exactly what he had promised it would be. She reached him. She stopped. She looked up at him. He looked at her. Dr. Nasser, with the professional composure of a man who has prepared for this moment with a geological survey and intends to do it justice. "Ready?" Dr. Nasser said. She looked at Karim. He looked at her. "Yes," they said, at exactly the same moment. Then both of them looked at each other with the shared surprise of perfect simultaneity, and she, the real laugh, the one that arrived before she could manage it, the one that was only ever his, and he smiled the complete smile, and Dr. Nasser said, "Wonderful," in a tone of considerable personal satisfaction, and the desert held its enormous, patient silence, and the spring plateau did what it had been doing for 1,700 years, and the golden hour light fell exactly where Dr. Nasser's survey had predicted, and they said the words. She had set up the shot before the ceremony, not for the vows, those she would witness with her own eyes, with no lens between her and them, the discipline she had been learning since the kitchen table and the corridor and the courtyard, and all the moments she had chosen to stay inside rather than frame. But one shot, one frame. The frame she had known, somewhere below conscious planning, since the first morning on the plateau when she had looked at the watchtower and understood why he came back every year. She had set the camera on a tripod at the northern edge of the summit, angled southwest, and set the timer for the moment Dr. Nasser's survey had identified as the peak of the golden hour. She had composed the frame the night before, alone on the plateau in the last of the day's light, making the adjustments with the precision she brought to everything that mattered. She had tested it twice and reviewed both tests and made one small correction to the horizontal. Then she had left the camera on its tripod and gone back down the slope and trusted the preparation. The camera fired at 5:47. She reviewed it that evening in the palace, in the library where the photograph of the plateau still hung on the wall and now had company, her own photographs beside it, filling the available space with the accumulated evidence of 7 months of Zafaran seen through her eye. She sat at the desk and opened the file on her laptop and looked at what the camera had seen. The frame held everything. The plateau's edge, the desert falling away below, the watchtower at the right of frame solid and unhurried as always. The spring sky above, deep blue shading to gold at the horizon, the specific, unrepeatable blue of a Zafaran spring afternoon at its peak. And in the center, the two of them, small against the immensity of the landscape, but present with the completeness of people who know exactly where they are, standing together in the golden light with the desert behind them and the sky above and the 1,700-year-old stones of a civilization that had built for permanence all around. She was looking at him. He was looking at her. Neither of them was looking at the camera. The light was exactly right. The frame was exactly right. It was, she thought, looking at it in the library light with the palace quiet around her, the best photograph she had ever taken. Not because of the composition, though the composition was exact. Not because of the light, though the light was everything. Because of what it held. Because of what it was true about. She sent it to Daniel at 9 that evening with a single line. For the cover, L. He called back in 3 minutes. She heard him look at it in the silence on the phone before he spoke. Then, yes, he said. Just that. Just yes. The way people said things that were complete. The celebration afterward, back at the palace, in the courtyard with the fountain and the lanterns and what Tariq had sourced as the most extraordinary lamb she had yet eaten in a country of extraordinary lamb, lasted until 2 a.m, because Maya had put no specific end time in the schedule's contingency column, and Tariq had taken this as a personal mandate. Dr. Nasir told the story of his geological survey to Daniel 3 times, each version more technically detailed than the last. Daniel, who had spent 30 years editing human stories and had the patience of someone who understood that detail was not the enemy of narrative, listened to all 3 versions with genuine attention. The sheikh danced once, briefly, with a dignity that somehow made the dancing more rather than less dignified, while Nadia watched from the side with the expression of a woman witnessing the correct conclusion to a story she has been following closely. Tariq gave a speech. It lasted 18 minutes. It was perfect. He cried at the end of it and attributed it, as always, to nothing. Maya gave a speech. It lasted 4 minutes, was funnier than Tariq's by a factor she would later quantify as considerable, and ended with, I told her at an airport at 6 a.m. to show me a photo of him, and I knew then. I knew before she knew. I know everything first. This is simply my nature, and I have learned to live with it gracefully. She sat down to the most sustained applause of the evening. Karim, beside Lara, leaned close and said very quietly, She's not wrong. I know, Lara said. Don't tell her that. She already knows, he said. Yes, Lara agreed. She always does. Late, after the speeches and the lamb and the dancing and the stories and the long, warm dissolution of an evening that had been exactly what it was meant to be, she and Karim walked in the courtyard as they had walked in it before, the fountain doing its indifferent work, the stars above the desert dense and structural, the city lights at the horizon warm and permanent. She had her camera. She almost always had her camera. But she held it at her side rather than at her eye, and the night was something to be inside rather than to frame, and she had gotten, she thought, considerably better at the distinction. The article, he said. How does it end? She had finished it the previous week. 10,000 words, first person. The story of a wrong turn and a desert and everything that had followed. She had written it in the library, at the desk across from his, in the evenings, while he read with the reading glasses on. And he had not read it as she wrote it. She had not offered, and he had not asked, both of them understanding that the writing was its own kind of privacy, the way the photographing was. He would read it when Daniel published it in the spring issue. She thought he would find it accurate. "It ends here," she said, "in the courtyard, on this night." She looked at the fountain. "With this." With what specifically? She turned to look at him, at the man she had married twice, once with a checkpoint, and once with a geological survey and golden hour, and Dr. Nasir in a suit, and both times completely, and both times meaning every word, in the starlight above the desert that had started all of it. And she thought about everything the last 8 months had been, and the full length of the thread that ran through them, and the particular improbability of where it had arrived. And she found, as she always found when she needed the true thing, the precise and undefended version of it. "With the part where it turns out the ruins weren't ruins," she said. "With the part where the thing I came to photograph turned out to be the thing that was still standing." He looked at her in the courtyard starlight, this man who had driven into a desert in the dark, who had said, "Are you injured?" and "I trust you," and "Don't." And you came back, and I don't want to be slow anymore, and ask me properly and more deliberately this time. Who had shown her a plateau at sunrise, and a city at blue hour, and his mother's photograph on a study wall, and a ring in a worn, dark box that had been waiting for her. Who was precise about most things, and had been, by his own admission, slow about this one. And who was now standing in a courtyard in the desert in the spring night, with the full, complete, unguarded version of his face entirely visible, which she knew was a thing he gave to very few people, and which she intended to be worthy of indefinitely. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear with the same unhurried certainty as every other gesture he had ever made, the one that said, "I am here. I have decided to be here. I know exactly what I am doing, and I am doing it completely." "Then it's a good ending," he said. She looked at him. The fountain, the stars, the desert, the city, the palace holding its 400 years with the same patient permanence as the watchtower, the same decision to simply not be finished yet. "Yes," she said. "It's the best one." She raised the camera. She looked at him through the viewfinder, the starlight, his face, the whole true open version of it, the courtyard and the fountain and the desert night behind him. She composed the frame. She held it. Then she lowered the camera without pressing the shutter. She took his hand instead. He looked at her, the question in it, the small surprised warmth of it. And she looked back and said nothing, because there was nothing to say that the gesture hadn't already said more precisely. She had the photograph in her mind. She would always have it there. Some frames were more true than their records. Some things you kept by staying inside them, by choosing the living of them over the documenting, by understanding that the camera saw everything, and also that there were things you wanted to see, with nothing between you and them at all. The fountain went about its endless, indifferent work. The desert held its absolute silence. The stars were very bright above the plateau where the watchtower stood, as it had always stood, watching the horizon with 1,700 years of patience and the knowledge of what it had been waiting for. It had found it. So had she. The spring issue ran the plateau photograph on the cover, full bleed, no text except the title in small white letters at the lower left corner.
The story ran inside, 10,000 words, first person, from the wrong turn to the courtyard to the moment in the library when she had understood she was home. Daniel called it the best thing she had ever written. She told him she'd had good material. He said that was always the photographer's answer, and she said that was because it was always true. The magazine sold out in 4 days. Several readers wrote in asking where Zafaran was. She wrote back, to all of them, with the same answer. It is the country you arrive at when you take the wrong turn and decide, instead of going back, to keep going. Several of them wrote again to say they understood. She thought they probably did. The photograph on the cover was extraordinary. The two of them small against the desert and the spring sky, in the golden hour, looking at each other. The watchtower behind them, patient and permanent. The desert falling away below. The light exactly right. The frame exactly right. Everything true. She had one copy framed. She hung it in the library, beside the photograph of the plateau her mother-in-law had taken 20 years before, and beside her own photograph of his back on the slope on day 2. And the space between the three of them told a story she had not planned and could not have composed, and which was, for that reason, the best story she had ever been inside.
The camera sees everything. That is the thing people always forget. You point it at what you are looking at, but the frame is wider than your attention. It catches what you didn't mean to look at. And sometimes, what you didn't mean to look at is the truest thing in the frame.